I'm Graeme Park, and today I'm joined by a true DJ legend, a British DJ who started DJing in 1975. Now, I was 11, but he was only 15, so that makes us quite a similar age, really. Please welcome Greg Wilson.
Hiya, Graeme.
How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you so much for joining us for this chat. Now, you're originally from New Brighton.
Yes.
Lovely part of the world.
Oh, okay.
And you started DJing in 1975. But tell us, before we get to how you started DJing, tell us about the young Greg Wilson. Who was the young Greg Wilson and what were you into as a kid?
Okay, well, I grew up in New Brighton, which is a seaside town, and we lived in, from the age of 6 to 13, we had a pub downstairs, we had 2 function rooms in the middle floors, where mobile DJs were coming in and out every weekend. So there's always this kind of music around me. Obviously, within a seaside town with fairgrounds and stuff, there was singles being played, on the rides and everything, loads of Motown, Trojan reggae and that kind of stuff. My older brother and sister, they were buying 7-inch singles, they were buying a lot of Stax, Atlantic, Motown. So my first love was kind of soul music, and then when I was about 11, I started buying records myself, and eventually kind of gravitated towards becoming a DJ at 15 in the local clubs and everything. So
how did you take the step? So hearing these mobile discos,
yeah,
and hearing like me, a child of the 60s, so the Motown sound, the Stax sound, just fantastic. When did you decide I want to be a DJ?
I mean, I had a friend, Derek, called Derek Kelty, Derek K.
I know
his
Derek.
DJ name, yeah. And we went to school together, and he was like really good at electronics and stuff, and we became friends because we both bought records and loved records and everything. But he made this very rudimentary DJ console with a drawer and put 2 turntables in.
Right.
And he had like a switch between the 2, which was the kind of mixer.
Yeah.
It was very basic, but it was really impressive, like when I was so young. And he was doing like the school disco and stuff like that. And then went kind of more professional and started doing weddings. It's mad to think about. He was doing like people's weddings when he was about 14 and stuff.
Really?
And, yeah. And he had a great mobile. And when he updated that mobile setup, I mean, I'd gone along with him and I'd kind of sat and done a bit of DJing there, but, just tagging along really. But when he updated his console, me and another school friend bought that and set out as a mobile disco in 75. He'd originally called it Sound Machine. We changed it to Dancing Machine after the Jackson 5 track. And to be honest, only did a few bookings before there's a place in New Brighton called the Chelsea Reach, and it was, the first place everyone went out to and everything. Right. But they also had like functions upstairs, and we were doing a wedding upstairs, and the manager came up and said, the DJ hasn't turned up downstairs, can one of you come down and do it? And in those days, they used to have their own records. Yeah. So it wasn't a case of, problem there. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. So I was down there, and it was Saturday night there, so it was a really big night. And they give me the weekly on the back of that. So that was my first residency, the Saturday, and then I got another job at a club called the Penny Farthing, which was just down the road in New Brighton. So I was doing about 3 nights there, and that was before I was 16. So my whole kind of schooling went out the window, because by the time I finished school, I was working pretty much 7 nights a week. So
did at any point you go, right, I want to be a DJ, or did you just think, oh, I'll have a little go at it, and then decide that that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, back then being a DJ was very different to being a DJ now.
Totally different.
It wasn't necessarily a career move as such, because if you wanted to make it as a DJ in a big way, radio was what you were aiming for. So, I kind of gravitated into it. Now I look back on it, it was always going to happen. It was obviously natural, and having Derek as a friend also, as I said, I'd seen all these mobile discos. I knew what a good DJ was just instinctively from just spending all that time in there, listening to people and everything. So it was a natural move, but back then, it wasn't seen as a long-term career.
No, exactly.
They used to call it a young man's game. And no man, and women weren't kind of seen as, so it was, people didn't think you kind of continued doing it after, you know, you got like mid-20s or something, you've got a family and stuff.
You say people say it's a young man's game, but just thinking about it, if you started DJing in 1975, then next year, I'm sorry to say this, it'll be your 50th anniversary.
It will, well, yeah.
So that, and I'm currently on 40 years, so that means right now between us, we have got 89 years of experience.
Well, I did stop for 20 years, so...
Yeah, but you're still working in the industry, though,
yes,
weren't
of
you?
course, yeah.
So does that mean that means it's not a young man's game, really? If we're
well,
still here?
it's changed. I mean, what it's become, and the way I look at it now, is the DJ kind of acquired the role of maestro, you know, the conductor of the orchestra, who has the wisdom, who's you know, seen it all.
I like it.
Been
Wisdom,
through it. So age, in fact, became a positive thing.
Yeah.
I think that people like that because of the experience involved in that.
Is that why, I was going to ask this much later on, but I may as well ask it now. Is that why people like you and me are still here? Because
I think quite possibly.
I don't know about you, but when I started DJing in 1984, I was kind of like, well, I'll do this for a bit and see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd said to me, you'd be doing this for the rest of your life and into the 21st century, did you think you would be?
No, not at all. I mean...
So why are people like you and I still here?
I think that's it, because we have that experience and that background. We've lived with music all these years, and you know, we can bring that into play and stuff. Whereas, you know, if you're a younger DJ, obviously you're kind of learning your craft. You're learning the music. I mean nowadays, I think it's really interesting now if you're a young DJ, because apart from the contemporary stuff that you're drawing from, you've got a whole history of music, and that's your heritage.
Exactly.
And to do with as they want to do, you know, to like we did, you know, we kind of mashed things around and sampled things up and everything and did what we did. And they have the same kind of possibilities now and everything. And but it's the whole thing to look back on, and with the internet, you know, it's the exploration of it, they can look to so much stuff. So I suppose that's it, that we've lived that, so we know this music, we've seen it come and go, we've seen what works, what doesn't work, we've seen what's revived and comes around and everything. So it's all that experience that we can bring into play, and I think that's enabled us to work for obviously a hell of a lot longer than we would have ever expected.
Oh, tell me about it. So looking at the kind of newer DJs, technology has kind of democratized the whole way of DJing. It's much easier now to put mixes together using the tech. Mm-hmm. But you still use an old reel-to-reel, a Revox reel-to-reel. Now, not only does it look great, but what you do on it, just explain to everyone what it is you do with it, and why you continue to cart a big, heavy, bloody box about with you.
Well, I mean, I originally bought a Revox back in the early 80s when I started doing mixes for radio, for Piccadilly Radio. They were like some of the early mixes on radio. Initially, we used to go into Legend in Manchester in the daytime and record it as live. And then they took it to the station and top and tailed it, which was basically putting leader tape on and finishing tape at the end. So it was broadcast ready to go when the show was the following Sunday, I think it was. And eventually it got to one day where there was nobody back at the station to edit the tape. Mm-hmm. And I'd been showing the basics of tape editing a few years before. And I thought, I'll have a go. I just got into it, and next thing I'm reversing little bits of tape and I'm really getting creative with it. And so I thought, I've got to. And so I bought my own home studio setup, which was completely unusual. No one had Technics SL1200s back then, in clubs, let alone. I mean, Legend had them, and probably a few precious other places, but they weren't widespread at all. And I bought a Revox B77, started doing my mixes from home, and everything started to become more intricate. The editing became much of a feature. So rather than it being as live, so if it was a kind of half hour, an hour, it lasted that amount of time. Now it was taking hours and hours because I was slowing down, editing things up, trying things out, doing tricks and stuff. And so that's where the Revox came into play. Now, when I stopped DJing and I was working in the studio as a producer, what I used to do was make tapes of sounds, effects, samples, you know, crashes, bangs, bit of spoken bit, and separate them with bits of leader tape. So as you know, I'd sit in the studio listening to a track I was working on, just sit back, play the tape randomly over the top of what I was playing, and then say, I like that and I'd record it. So what we do is record the whole thing and then wipe what I didn't want. So most of the stuff would be wiped, but I like that sound there. That sound I'll take into a sampler. I could make more of a feature of that. And so I was using it as a random thing to kind of pepper what I was doing there. And when I came back to DJing at the end of 2003, I had these dilemmas on which way do I go? I don't want to go back to being like I used to be, playing off vinyl with the old records. I don't want to be a retro DJ in that respect. Maybe the way to go is a laptop. I got a system called PC DJ and used from the laptop because I wanted to bring my edits into play. And that was the thing. When I came back into DJing, I'd been detached from things for a good few years and didn't realise that this edit culture had evolved, and people were kind of now, with computer technology, taking old tracks and putting them in time and maybe adding to them and everything just to beef them up and make them more applicable for now. And so I've been doing edits back in 1983, 84. I used to do...
Well, you credited as doing the first edit by a British DJ.
Well, that was Heaven Sent by Paul Hague. I mean, I think there were things the other way around where they reduced the time, so people edited things to make a radio version.
Exactly, yeah.
But in terms of making a 12-inch edit and everything, I can't think of anything that was before that. And then, like in 84, I wasn't DJing. I'd stopped DJing by this point, and I was really trying to get remix work. And I kind of figured, I mean, when I stopped DJing, I was working, on a scene which was all American imported music. It was really on point, up to date. And I kind of figured that me sending my mixes to record companies, they didn't know the tracks I was playing. Yeah. So they didn't see what I was doing. So what I did was a series of, I'd pick tracks that were big chart tracks. Two Tribes, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, I Feel For You, Chaka Khan, Scritti Politti, these. And I'd do my own kind of, I call them turntable edits, which the term re-edit wasn't about. And I basically utilised, do it with two turntables, editing maybe a little bit of kind of overdub from a cassette deck, so samples from a cassette deck. And I did that literally to try to get myself remix work. And they were played on, weirdly, Timmy Mallett's show on Piccadilly.
Really?
He used to do a show, and it was a brilliant show. It was a kind of youth show for teenagers. I remember Chris Evans. Yeah. He was his guy on the road. He used to go and knock on people's door and, all sorts of stuff. And so they had a real all-happening show, and I used to do this series of edits for them. I mean, nobody really cared at the time. It was like weird. When I came back, I played one of these edits first night, which was the Chaka Khan, I Feel For You. And I remember people coming over asking, what is this? And I'm like, this is mad. Nobody was interested 20 years ago. I sent these to loads of record companies, hardly got any feedback. And now people are like really interested in what's going on. So I fell into this re-edit thing perfectly. And, it enabled me. Now, the Revox coming back into play was, this idea of having all stuff recorded and randomly kind of listening through, that works, spinning it over the top of the track I'm playing, which is off CD, and that's what I did. So it peppers up what I'm playing and gives each time a personality. So samples, if you listen to my mixes, my recorded mixes, you'll hear the same samples, but they're always turning up in different places. So that's the kind of thing.
So that's what you do now. You still have all these sounds on your Revox.
So as I'm DJing, just normally off CD, I'm listening.
Yeah, you still use CD. You've not gone USB.
I do. And that's supposed to change. I meant to do it during lockdown.
We'll spend an afternoon together. It is easy.
I know. It's just a case of the actual physical thing of doing or getting all my tracks together. And putting them in that system.
No, that's a good point.
It will be.
When you're ready, give me a shout.
I'm ready now. It's just I haven't got around to doing it.
Let's do it. Anyway, but it must be a real pain dragging that thing about.
Well, it is, but I'm used to it. I mean, it's come all over the world with me. It's really crazy, and if I didn't have it, people would be really disappointed. On the few occasions where I haven't had it for whatever reason, You know, they come over to take a photograph, and they're not interested in me. They want to take a photograph of this.
You must have more than one, yeah?
Yeah, I've got 3, I think.
And what happens when you go abroad? Do you take it with you?
Yeah, I do. I used to have them abroad. I'd
okay.
have one in Australia, one in the States, one in Japan.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I that's how I used to do it, just go over and pick it up at that end. But now I pretty much take it with me everywhere. It's just simpler.
On the subject of your edits, I am a massive fan of your edits because you show a lot of respect to the original. You know, you get some DJs, well, a lot of producers now, they'll email me and go, I've done a remix of this track. And you go, no, you haven't done a remix of it. You've just taken it and messed about with it and just put a 4 to the floor under it and make it techie or whatever. But you're very respectful to the original, which is what I really love. My favourite edit of yours is Voodoo Ray, because what you've added to it just enhances everything. I haven't played the original for decades. I always play your mix.
Oh, right, nice. I mean, that incorporates like the Frankie Knuckles mix as well.
Exactly. And you know, if anyone's not familiar with your credits to the edit series, just go to your various websites. A good starting point is gregwilson.co.uk.
Yep.
And you can get links through to that. How do you approach an edit? If you're going to say, right, I really want to edit this track, how do you approach it?
I mean, it's always practical. It's like, I want to play this track in the context of now, but the issue is that it's not quantized properly, that it's hard to mix. So that's the first thing, is really...
yeah, because a lot of the tracks you're wanting to re-edit have got real drummers, real bass lines, real musicians, so it'll drift,
Yeah, so it's not that I want to... I mean, initially my original edits were just straight edits. They were like literally editing the original, but now, you know, obviously I want to make sure that everything's in time, that it can be mixed and stuff like that. Often I work with musicians who are, you know, more adept at kind of that side of things to me. But it's always practice. It's always to play it. I want to play this track, but I'm being stopped from playing it because it just needs to be bringing into this context. So I always want to stick as true to the original. It's not that I'm trying to change the original.
You're not remixing it. You're just
it's just reworking it really.
Shortening bits.
I love it the way it is. I'd play it the way it is if I could, but it doesn't work in this kind of current context because, you know, we're 50 years down the line or whatever.
So I mean, my plan was to do a chronological chat, but we're jumping all over the place, but I think that's fine. You mentioned Piccadilly 261, which later became Key 103. Stu Allen, the late Stu Allen. You ended up, you know, doing mixes for his show.
No, I didn't do. I did Mike Shaft.
Oh, sorry, Mike Shaft. Yeah.
So Stu came
later.
But
Stu Allen was playing a lot of the stuff.
Yeah. What happened with Stu?
Very overrated and underrated. Sorry, underrated DJ, wasn't he?
I didn't realise with Stu until years later when I was reading something and he cited me as an influence, and he talked about Legend and going to Legend as being a big thing for him. And since then, I interviewed him. There's an interview on my website, Electro Roots, which is great to have now because he's not with us anymore. And I don't think people interviewed him in this way. I think maybe they talked to him about contemporary things, but what was his background? How did he get into it? So he came from Anglesey, and he ended up in Manchester, and he basically flukily tuned into Piccadilly on a Sunday when Mike Shaft was playing, and he met somebody in a bar he worked at who said, oh, I go to a club on a Wednesday called Legend, do you fancy coming along? And he was like, yeah. So he came to Legend, saw it, what was going on, he was just blown away with it. And I think he got a job just as a tape op or even a T-boy at Piccadilly, and he'd go there every night, and eventually he got the opportunity of the show, and he took over from, well, not directly from Mike Shaft, there was somebody in between, but he took over that show, and amazing. I mean, it always saddened me that Stu never got the praise for what he did. I mean, he was absolutely key for. I mean, it's there. Mike Pickering talks about Stu's show.
First radio player, Voodoo Ray.
Yeah, Lauren. I mean, he gave Gerald his name. He said, "This is my guy called Gerald."
A guy called Gerald. Yeah.
And Laurent Garnier speaks about him, about listening to. I think he played Farley Jackmaster Funk on the Import. Laurent Garnier said it took him about 4 weeks to get that record, but you know, he was listening to Stu Allen playing it, so he had a real big influence. I kind of figured the reason why he's been downplayed is because his career trajectory eventually went more towards it went more in that hardcore direction, and basically went a little bit kind of banging. And I think people, like, saw that as a bit of a sellout or whatever, I don't know, but he never got that credit.
No, exactly.
And yet he was absolutely major. I'm not just on hip hop, but house.
Yes.
The two sides of it, he was promoting through Piccadilly, through Key 103.
Yeah.
And so Stu's definitely one of those forgotten characters. But
you mentioned Legends. We have to talk about Legends. How important was Legends to where we are now in the British club culture? And how did you end up at Legends?
Well, Legend was, I got the residency at a club called Wigan Pier, and Wigan Pier was had been open
Wigan Pier Legends
in '79, and it was a real state of the art, and it was one of the first clubs in the country to be designed on the American or New York approach, and it was like lasers and great sound system. This is when most clubs, there was like a tinny sound system in the corner. It was awful. So Wigan Pier was incredible. And the same people opened Legend, and it was a smaller, Wigan Pier held close to 1,000. Legend was more kind of 500 figure, more compact. Amazing, the sound system they put in. That's the first time I'd had sub bass in a club. They had, the lighting was just off the scale. I mean, if you open Legend now, even now, all these years on, people would still be just knocked over by it. I mean, you don't see a comparison. So Legend being that kind of club, but also the Wednesday night that I did, which was the funk night. So we're playing jazz funk, like what's called boogie now, soul funk. Eventually the electro came out.
Yeah, I want to ask you about electro, because you're very passionate about electro funk. You've even got the electrofunk.roots.co.uk website. When you first heard that early kind of what you kind of class as electro funk, what did you think, and how did it affect you?
Well, I think the first kind of time that this new sound started to emerge was like back end of '81. And one of the key tracks was D-Train, You're the One for Me, which was the Francois Kevorkian mix. It was it wasn't the main vocal side, it was the other side, which was the big side. And if you listen to that record now, you'd kind of go, it doesn't sound that revolutionary. And that's the reason is because so many things copied that record.
They did. But
well, when it came out, it was absolutely like choppy synth and it was a new sound.
Well, it's because they started using synths and drum machines.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas traditionally funk and soul was like real musicians.
That was it. And then in the early part of '82, there was a few tracks that started to come out. Stone, Time, Peach Boys, Don't Make Me Wait, was a major landmark. Cinnamon, Thanks to You, huge track.
And of course, all that you mentioned American acts, but it started to influence British productions as well, didn't it?
Absolutely, and also within that time span as well, the early time, one of the big tracks was Electro Feels Good, which was Italo disco.
Yes.
And later on down the line, that Jamie Principle track, Your Love, that took the bass part of Electro Feels Good, into that. So that was initially played there. So these tracks with an electronic kind of aspect. I mean, looking back at them now, a lot of the time it's a mixture of live instrumentation and technology. But back then it sounded really futuristic. I mean, obviously then you got the full-on electro sound, like the Planet Rock sound of it all and everything. But there was this electro funk sound was a bit of a merge of two things. And the term came about organically, as far as I'm aware. In the clubs, there was one of the big early tracks was Electric Funk on a Journey, which was another prelude track just after D-Train. And people started to say, have you got any of those electric funk tracks? Have you got that? You played an electric funk track last week. So that was there knocking about electric funk. And then there was a track that came out called Electrophonic Funk by Shock. And it's what they say, it's not rock, it's not funk, we don't need new wave, just electronic funk.
Remember it,
not rock, it's not punk. And electro funk kind of span off that. It was much easier, kind of. And so at that point, people started to use that term, and it was knocking around for maybe 6 months, and then eventually, you know, London picked it up as a term, and it was used like for charts and things like that. And the funk came off the end of it probably when Morgan Kahn's Electro series started, which was in October of '83. So it's quite a long time after, because Planet Rock, remember, is May of '82. So it's about a kind of 18-month kind of span between those two things happening. So it was really underground, and it was this emerging sound, and it was replacing jazz funk. So jazz funk had been the predominant music on the black music scene. It was never all one way, so it wasn't like when I was at Legend I just played electro, but electro was predominant. I was still playing bits of jazz, playing the more orthodox soul funk, boogie. As I say, we called it disco funk. There was no term boogie. That was retrospectively used from the Rare Groove side in London. So yeah, it was this kind of mixture of music that was coming together, but this predominant thing that was happening was this electronic sound, and eventually, you know, that had massive influence and kind of split off to techno, house, hip hop, and go and influence all those directions onwards.
You could argue that a lot of those early electro-funk records is when the 4 to the floor kick started to, you know, pre-house started to kind of come to prominence. So going back to DJing Legends, if you're Wigan Pier and Legends, presumably the equipment and the turntables are getting better and eventually getting onto the Technics. So you're able to start mixing, right, like properly mixing. And of course, you end up being the first example of any DJ mixing live on British television on the Tube. Tell us, how was that?
Well, I mean, you know, from my side of mixing.
By the way, the video, if you haven't seen it, you've got to watch it. Your hair is amazing.
It's very curly.
You've still got good hair, but this was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, mixing was something that back end of the 70s was being talked about. James Hamilton in Record Mirror was the real champion for it. We were starting to realise what was happening in New York, and it was all continuous, but the UK was a microphone culture of DJs.
Well, I know.
And initially,
it
didn't break through. That people were like, well, why? You know, this is the way we DJ. We don't want this American stuff. So there was this kind of vibe of it. You know, there was obviously people that were more progressive and were looking at that, but mixing wasn't really happening. I mean, when I was 18, 19-year-old DJ, I was doing 3 in a row here and there, but the microphone was still there. Then I went to work in Europe. I worked in Germany in 1980, did a 2-month contract. And I'd actually...
Which city?
It was called Mulheim, near Essen, in Germany. Now, in 78, you know, as I say, it was being talked about and everything. And I'd even been to London to a club called the Embassy, where the first proper UK mixing DJ was a guy called Greg James. He was he's Argentinian, but he was from New York. He lived, and he was a friend of Richie Caxor, who was at Studio 54 and everything. He came into the Embassy, which fancied itself as a London Studio 54. That's what it was setting up. And I went there and I saw him and everything. But it wasn't until 80 that it really kind of galvanised. And on one of my nights off, I went into Essen. There was a club called Librium, and it was a very small, compact club. And I remember the light control of everything. He had the bar lights, he had the whole club. They had hydraulics on the dance floor, and it was a very impressive club. And the DJ was mixing, and he was kind of playing both like dance music and kind of alternative type stuff that was about the new romantic side of things. And I thought it was great what he was doing. I remember thinking, in the right context, in the right context, this is the way to go. That's
what I did when I started, because you had those great 12-inch instrumental mixes and dub mixes of Human League records and ABC records, and they mixed in really well with the electro.
Absolutely.
Stuff. And crucially, not using the mic.
Yeah. I mean, I think the DJ was Peter Romer, who was very famous. I mean, he was the first German mixing DJ. Only from like research backwards, I know he played that club regularly. He came and played it. He was in Hamburg at a club called Trinity. And so when I came back, I got the job at the Wigan Pier. I came back directly from Germany. I got the job at Wigan Pier. And so I started to kind of bring more mixing in. But when I got Legend, and it was such a kind of hardcore black crowd, that the idea of the microphone patter of the DJ just didn't seem right. Although, you know, you always use it for announcements to tell people all day as we're coming up, this, you know, but to use it primarily just seemed wrong. And the mixing, and at that moment, Graeme, was when these new electronic tracks started. It was right at that moment. So it was a perfect storm for me. And bit by bit, these new electronic, I was mixing more, I became known as the mixing DJ. Mike Shaft gave me this slot on Piccadilly doing the mixes, so that started in May '82 as well. That took my name out wider. Legend just went through the roof, and we had queues up the road every Wednesday for 18 months. You know, it was off the scale, Legend, as a scene, and people travelling from all over the place to it, as the same was with Wigan Pier. And so, you know, all of a sudden I was in a situation where on this specialised scene, I had a club that no one could compete with. I was the only person who was mixing, and I had this crowd. I just had it, and the scene flipped on its head from being a certain way. You know, I mean, the purists did not like what I was doing at all with the electro.
Purists are always the same in any scene.
And I took a lot of criticism. Even the record shop spinning that was selling it me, they were like being critical of this electro music and what I was doing. And I was being accused, you know, even in blues and soul, of like polluting the scene. You're ruining it with this is not soul. And I had this kind of, this attack taking place all the time. The people are coming and coming, it's massive. But I'm being told by the journalists and stuff, this isn't right.
Imagine if social media was around in those days.
God,
oh my Lord!
It was bad enough with blues and soul. You know, I was being accused of all sorts. You know, like in blues and soul, and they wouldn't print the word electro. They asterisked it like a swear word. You know, so it's mad. But in the end, I kind of thought, hang on, who are these people to talk about what is black music? They're all middle-aged white people. That's how I saw it. They're probably only in their 30s. Middle-aged white people. If you want to know what black music is, ask the black kids who are responding. And so I saw it in that, could say, you know, don't you know, and I almost took a kind of, you know, proactive role in it, in pushing the whole thing and everything. Yeah. Although it did take its toll on me, because I was like, 22-year-old. Everything's working out well for me, got a big ego, want a pat on the back, and everyone's telling I'm ruining it.
That must have been tough at 22.
So it was a little bit.
But we can't not talk about Hacienda, because this is Hacienda in conversation. So you ended up being asked by Mike Pickering
and Rob Gretton
to DJ at Hacienda.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, because everyone's very familiar with 88, 89, me and Mike and all the acid house thing, blah, 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 blah. But this was before the Hacienda was really known as a nightclub. It was more of a live venue. So tell us about the Hacienda.
Well, it had opened again in May '82. That was a really big month.
42 years ago.
And it was like, I think August '83 when I started. I was only there for, you know, to the end of '83. I was there a short period of time, but you know, they'd all been over to New York, and you know. New Order obviously played the Certain Ratio. Madonna supported a Certain Ratio on her first gig in Danceteria.
Yeah.
So they'd done all that, and they knew what was going on. And I think that they discovered that down the road in Manchester at Legend, there's a club that's playing all this New York music, because you know, it was predominantly New York, the imports that we were playing. And I remember, you know, Tony Wilson being in there a few times, you know, and seeing him talking to Terry Lennon, who was the owner at the bar early night and stuff. And everyone knew who Tony Wilson was, because he was on Granada Reports. He was a bit of a celebrity. And then, you know, I'd hear Mike Pickering was in, you know, and Rob. And eventually they approached me. I remember having a meeting. It was in a pub at the canal near where the Hacienda is. I don't know what pub it was, but we chatted there, and they said...
Might have been the BP, the Britain's Protection.
And they offered me the Friday night on a really good fee as well. And they also offered me an hour on the Saturday night to try to acclimatise the main Saturday audience to what I might be doing on the Friday. So I did that. But the problem with the Hacienda, well, the problems with the Hacienda, it was quite problematic. Number one, they had a membership at the time. Yeah. And my crowd was predominantly black, didn't have much money. Most were kind of signing on. and couldn't afford a membership, and they tried to work around it, never quite got there, and it was a disaster first week, I think it was, when we had a coach come from Huddersfield, and Huddersfield were a great travelling crew, you know, they come mob-handed, and they brought a coach, so like 50 odd people. Got to the club, couldn't get in because of the membership issue, and ended up round the corner in Rotters or Romeo and Juliet, whatever it was called, and then just, you know, it was like real commercial club. So that wasn't going to happen again. So it's, and also the Manchester kids weren't getting in because of this membership issue. So that never got quite resolved. The biggest issue, though, was the DJ booth.
Yeah, the original. Tell everyone where the original DJ booth
was. Well, on the stage,
everyone's aware of the 20 feet in the air,
up in the air, where you were, you know, lording it up and getting all the acclaim. Well, we were stuck in a shoebox. Basically, you went on the stage and went down some steps, and it was like a radio studio more than a DJ booth. And Claude, was Claude still there when you were there? The video guy.
Yeah,
he was there, part with all his equipment, playing his mad videos, and in front of me was turntables there. The mixer was here. Yeah. And then there was a slat where you could see like people's like legs and stuff walking past. You know, you were so disconnected with it. So I'm trying to mix, and I had to mix. They didn't have faders. They had this button. I remember saying to like, I think it was Howard Jones, Ginger, who was the manager, we've got to get it, you know, this mixer's not, and he said, there's only 3 of these, and this is the, you know, I'm like, this is, you know, it's awful, it doesn't work, it's not proud. And years later, I did a blog piece about all this, and the people who designed the mixer got back in touch and said, the reason you had the problem, they were only using, there was 2 parts to the mixer. The other one had the crossfade run. That is, and they'd only used this
typical
thing.
Hacienda back in the day. Yeah.
So
things have changed. Like
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the sound of the club was never right. The acoustics, they always had problems. I mean, they got it better, but at that point in time, it was cold. I remember, you know, it's a big place to fill, and you know, you might have a few hundred people in there, but it seemed really empty, and it was cold, and so the whole thing. We had some great one-off nights. We had Houdini played, coming from America. Run DMC was supposed to play that night, but they were pulled out. But Houdini were the main act of the 2 at the time. We had Nutriment, who were a British act who'd done a big electro track called "On Bridges Falling Down." We'd had the breakdancing and body popping championships of the Northwest, which was this was all happening at the same time. So we had some brilliant one-off nights, but to get it going, there were too many things against us. And in between, Hacienda also had bookings. They had bands booked on certain Fridays. So we'd have a decent night, but we couldn't build on it because the next week it'd be closed because they had something else on. So it was a frustration, really. But it was about planting seeds. Now I look back and see what happened. Because Broken Glass, the breakdancers who I managed at the time, they had a big role to play because they come in on the Saturday night when I was doing that hour and dance on the stage, and the crowd loved them. Yeah, the crowd adored them, and they became like celebrities in the Hacienda. They all got lifetime memberships and everything. They were kind of known for a while as the Hacienda's breakdancers and stuff like that. And they gave the club a credibility with the black audience. Because I remember those guys saying, we're going to do the Hacienda, and them saying, well, why do we want to do that? They won't be into what we're doing. They're all kind of goths and kind of students in raincoats, and you know. And I was like,
long raincoats and fringes.
Give them a chance, they'll be fine. All right, they went, and they loved it. You know, the people really went for it and everything. So Broken Glass brought in that kind of mentality that wasn't there before, that made, you know, the black audience kind of look, maybe that club's got something for us, whereas previously we would have thought it was completely separate.
So getting up to 1983, you're still only 23, and you've been DJing for about 8 years, since you're 15, and then you suddenly decide, that's it, I'm retiring, I'm giving up. You then had 20 years of not DJing. Yep. Just briefly, why did you give up, and what were you doing for 20 years?
Well, there was various factors that kind of came to that. I mean, one of them was like breakdancing had really exploded. Yeah. And I was straight in there, and I was managing Broken Glass, the Manchester crew, and it was great time, amazing time. But also at club level, what was starting to happen, initially everybody loved it. It was so visually exciting to watch. But after a little while, if I played a record remotely electro, there'd be a ruck of guys in a circle on the dance floor, holding everyone back.
I
It was
witnessed that myself.
testosterone driven,
Yeah.
and the girls were like, we just want to get our groove
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
And so you could see there was a change in the vibe of what was going on. I understood that the scene's not going to sustain the way it had. It's going to split off, and which it did. You know, the hip hop started to emerge and things. Although everything still stayed together, things were all played on the same night, as you remember.
Yeah.
But so that was the first kind of thing that was, you know, I got to a point where, back then, where did I go to from where I was? On this specialist scene, I was at the top of my tree. There was, I mean, had the Hacienda worked, maybe that would have been the next step, and it would have enabled me to bring in a wider variety of music. Because one of the things I look back at Legend, there's certain things I never played that were great records, and I kind of should have played, but it was a very snobby scene because they didn't like anything commercial. Or,
I've got to say, if the Hacienda had worked, maybe I would never have got the gig at the Hacienda.
I don't know about that, but you know. I don't know. It's like
But you went to London and you managed bands, you worked with record companies.
Yeah.
But then in 2003, what made you decide? Hang on a minute, I think it's time to get back on the decks.
Well, another reason why we're stopping, and I hadn't realised this. I've been DJing since I was 15. I hadn't had a normal teenage life. You know, I kind of, and when I say DJing back then, you're talking an average of 5 nights a week. It wasn't like just the weekend.
Absolutely.
So it was full on. So when I came to stop it, it enabled me to breathe a bit and take in other aspects of life. I started reading and stuff, things that I hadn't had a chance to do. Everything, I'd been completely focused on being a DJ all the time. So time moves on. I got into production, worked with various things. It's an up and down life. Sometimes things are going well. Sometimes you're looking behind the back of the couch to get some, have you got any change down here?
Yeah.
And I'm just broke, you know. And so I went through, I think that's good for your soul in a way, you know, to have a bit of that.
Yeah.
But it eventually got to early 2000s and I got computered up by that point and started to see what was going on online. There was a lot of history being talked about and the books being written as well. And I was like seeing the emissions and
Well, yeah, because that's one thing I wanted to talk about. You're very, very passionate about the history of, you know, club culture and dance music, black music. As I've said earlier, gregwilson.co.uk will link to electrofunks.co.uk and all your blog. What's it called? What's your blog called again?
Being a DJ.
So that was part of the reason why you wanted to come back, to put the record straight.
Yeah, because the first thing I did was set up Electro Funk Roots as a site, and I realised, I just thought, I was looking at it and it wasn't there, you know.
Yeah.
It was like there was this kind, and I remember, I've quoted this quite a lot, but it really, I remember driving in the car one night and there was a BBC documentary going on about Manchester. And I remember there was a statement made in that documentary that where somebody said the reason that Manchester was quicker off the mark with regards to house music than the South was because they were used to dancing to the up-tempo rhythms of Northern Soul. And I was like, Wigan Casino closed in 81. The Northern Soul scene was dead on its feet. It kind of slightly revived itself and eventually, you know, came back. But at that point, it had gone. And 88 was when it exploded.
Exactly.
So there's 7 years. And yet they were conveniently trying to tie those two things together because drugs, dancing all night, you know, they put the things together. Fast music, okay, there we are. They must
lazy journalism.
And so it was all this kind of that made me think, well, you don't know what it wasn't the Northern Soul suit house, it was the Black Kid, and you know that from Nottingham as well.
Yeah.
You saw what happened there, and places like Leeds, Sheffield, these places
Exactly.
were young black kids. I mean, it was different in London because they had the rare groove scene, so the house scene kind of came more through the gay clubs, whereas in the north it came through the black clubs, and that's how it evolved. And so I kind of thought at the time, I've got all my archive material in my loft, and I had time on my hands. I wasn't DJing, and I thought, I'm going to try to, you know, put together something to address this, you know, so that at least there is that information out there. And it's like a dam, you're sticking your finger in the holes and they keep opening up.
Tell me about it.
And the story, and you know, I talk about the Ibiza myth as well, which came into play.
Don't.
Yeah, you know, which basically became, everyone thought house
The
music come from
BBC
Ibiza.
did a documentary about that as well.
Yeah, and it just, all these things came into play, whereas you know that house music did not come from Ibiza.
No.
Ecstasy came back from Ibiza, and you know, that Balearic spirit, and it was amazing, and but house music was already in place and everything, and so Electro Funk Roots was really to address that situation, and as a result of setting that website up, that's when people started to ask me to DJ again.
Right.
And it started to.
But if anyone, I mean, younger viewers, if you haven't checked out electrofunk.co.uk, you should. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's a really very well researched history of.
Thanks, mate.
But also the book Discotheque as well.
Discotheque Archives.
That's brilliant because it's because of the artwork in it.
Yeah,
as well.
Pete Fowler's did all that.
That is absolutely fantastic. So since 2003, you've, you know, just got back up there and been busier and busier and back to traveling the world and everything. Are you glad you came back?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm shocked that it worked out the way it did. There was no master plan. I remember when I did my first gig.
It's a common theme among, I mean, I had no master plan, and I'm sat here talking to you, you know what I mean?
I did my first gig in Manchester, a place called Music is Better, a night called Music at the Attic. And there were a few people there who offered me gigs. Ralph Lawson was there. I got back to basics on the back of that. Went to Sheffield with one of the other DJs, Richard Hardcastle, Solid State. He got me a gig there. So, and then somebody came to Sheffield and got me a gig in Newcastle, and it was all organic. And bit by bit, it just started spreading out. And then about 12 months later, I was offered that album, the first credit to the Edit album.
Yeah.
And when I did that, that got me abroad. And I did my first Berlin, and then I went to the States. And all of a sudden it's snowballing, and it just happened, and it happened in the right way. And everything, when I did that first night, you know, working out how do I want to approach this, I thought that first night I'd come back from it and say, well, that worked, that didn't work so well, you know. Everything worked. It just worked. You know, using the Reeboks, spinning the sounds in, and it all came together. And as I say, it was very fortuitous because the re-edit thing played right into my hands, because I just slotted right into that immediately and was able to. So
even though you were only at the Hacienda for a short time, you are a Hacienda DJ, and you have since. The 2000s DJed on many Hacienda tours, many Hacienda nights. Now recently we've done the Warehouse Project a few times, 8,000 people in
amazing
there. Now most of the audience, from what I can see looking out from the DJ booth, were too young to have gone to the Hacienda. What is the Hacienda's appeal so many years after it closed?
Well, it's got that, I mean, there's only one other British club in history I can think of that has that same kind of aura, and that's the Cavern in Liverpool where the Beatles played.
Wow.
You know, anywhere you go in the world,
it's true.
People say to me, Hacienda, Hacienda.
Wow.
And I'm kind of saying to them, my club was legendary.
No, I know.
It wasn't too good when I was at the Hacienda, but they think that must be the ultimate.
No, exactly,
Well, I mean, you did have those ultimate experiences there, because I mean, I went in there in the time you were playing there, and I've never seen such a unity.
Exactly.
I always tell a story about being in one of the alcoves underneath, and I was with Kermit, my mate who was later in Black Grape, who was with the Rap Assassins, who I produced and managed, and we were just chatting, and Rich in Paradise FBI project, and it was the piano breakdown came on, and as I'm talking to him, I see his hand go up like that. He's just still talking to me, and I noticed round the booth, everyone
Yeah.
in the booth. And then I looked round and everyone. And it was total. I've seen things before where the dance floor is unified.
Yeah.
This was the club.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, this is us. It was like a national anthem, and everyone was, and that was an incredible thing, you know, to witness. And it must have been something else for you to you know, be there at the helm of it.
Mike and I looking down on that, it was just incredible.
Yeah.
And involuntary arms are going up as well, you know.
And that's
and
what
and the lighting booth as well, everyone.
What I love about the Hacienda was that when I went there, Mike and Rob Gretton and these kind of people, Tony Wood, these were crazy dreamers.
They were crazy dreamers.
They should never have been let loose in a nightclub. Money was going down the drain. They weren't doing it for business reasons. But they kept that belief. So when Mike and Rob said they wanted to bring dance music more to the front in the Hacienda, and this is where they were headed for it, they kept with that. And so after I'd gone, Mike started DJing. The Friday night became Nude Nights. He worked with Martin Prendergast, and they had a great scene there. You know, they built that up nicely. A lot of people think, oh, it all explodes in '88, which it does to a level, but I think from '86 onwards, they had a good scene going in the Hacienda, and they were attracting a lot of the black crowd in, who later the club lost when it went too busy and everything sardined in. So, you know, they kept with that vision. And 5 years down the line, it absolutely it becomes absolutely the right place for this.
So why do people in their 20s, why are they flocking to the warehouse? Was it to see old bastards like us?
Well, I think that, you know, obviously they want to kind of get a vibe of what this was. They've heard so much about it. And the music, you know, the whole thing, the music that it brought through and everything, and the vibes and stuff. And it's like we were saying before, we young people now, it's not like they're just into contemporary music.
No,
it's like
exactly.
if you would have taken us at their age, we would have had to go back to almost the 50s and rock and roll, you know. So that we weren't going to be doing that.
No.
Whereas now, if they go back 40, 50 years, they're still in dance music, in disco, in all these things. So the music translates. It's not that it's something that's grown old and that they couldn't connect with, you know. It's
how do you think clubbing's changed in your 49 years since you took to the decks?
Clubbing, well, it's just become this huge industry, and you know, it's very evolved from where it was.
It doesn't have that organic feel it used to, did it? Like, because you've just said, having an idea and letting it run until for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years until it comes to fruition. Nobody's got that patience anymore.
Well, no, and also it's like if you look at music scenes, so for example, like you would never have had that scene in Sheffield with the internet, because probably the moments that the first records came out of that, it would have been all over the place, and different places making it. So back then you could kind of grow something in isolation. I mean, I always look at hip hop, and I think why that was the kind of greatest kind of music of the, you know, certainly in terms of like financial revenue and everything of the late 20th century, it was just the massive music. Yet you look at those first 10 years from Cool Herc's parties, if you want to kind of date it back to that, to something like The Message coming out by Grandmaster Flash in '82, and it was allowed to incubate for all that time without anybody getting their grubby hands on it and a big record company saying, well, you know, we've just toned it down. You know, the labels that put it out, like Sugar Hill and Profile and stuff, they were letting it being done properly. And there was this idea of keeping it real. So by the time it did hit the mainstream in a big way, the artists and the producers were more in control of that music.
Well, yeah, because it was back in the day, people like you and me, you'd be lucky, you get an acetate, and that could be 3 months before people could buy the record. Even a test pressing would be 2 months, and a white label 6 weeks. Those days have gone, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely.
Everything's sudden, it has to be now.
Exactly, and so I don't think you have time for something like that. I think the reason hip hop was so big was it was left alone long enough for it to understand what it was.
We're running out of time, unfortunately. I'm sure we could carry on for another 2 hours, but just a few quick fire questions to wrap things up. What are you most proud of in your career?
Well, I think what I'm proud of in that sense is that I'm a white kid from New Brighton, which had hardly any black people. Yet I eventually was able to work with a crowd that I really respected because they were at the cusp musically, and as I say, they were largely black kids, and that's who I connected with. So I mean, that's why I had to kind of get back into the history and the documentation, because it's not just, you know, about music. It's about culture. It's about British culture. It's about, like,
yes,
you know, the fact that it's a time when black kids and white kids came together in very racist environments,
yeah,
overtly racist, you know, like, and yet these people came together, you know, under the banner of music, and, you know, all that went out the window as we went into these clubs and everything.
Favourite places to DJ?
Legend, every time.
What about today?
Today, you know, different places. I mean, different times. You know, I think things go around in cycles. I've had some great gigs recently. I mean, I played the Warehouse in Leeds the other week, and it was fabulous.
Yeah,
you know, it was the after party for the Hacienda thing. And Coco in Camden. I don't know if you've done that.
Yes, great.
The old Camden Palace.
The old Camden Palace. Yeah. No, I saw you post from there.
Yeah.
And quick, short piece of advice for aspiring DJs or up and coming DJs.
I think that you've got to, like, really know what you want to do and stick with it. Don't be kind of veer away. If something doesn't work immediately, don't just kind of throw it away and try something different, because that guy's it's working out for them there, you know. Stick with what you believe in and keep a hold of that.
What have you learned in life?
Oh, God. What have I learned in life? Oh, I mean, that's a wide-ranging question.
I'll let you off for that one, because it's supposed to be quick fire. What's on the horizon for you over the rest of the year?
Well, you know, I mean, it's going to be a busy summer again, lots of festivals coming up. I haven't really done, since COVID, I haven't done much overseas, and I'm probably going to hold it back to next year, because next year is going to be like the 50th anniversary when I started DJing. So, you know, I was supposed to go back out to Australia in October, but I think I'm going to stay at home and wait on next year now.
When you need a guest, give me a shout. When you need a guest DJ on your 50th anniversary, give me a shout. Because you're doing something for me for my 40th, aren't you?
Yeah.
Last question, what would you say to the young Greg Wilson in New Brighton?
Yeah, I mean, on a career level, I think maybe, you know, there's been times where I've been too precious about things. I understand why that, you know, I've kind of looked at my own kind of life.
But age and experience, it comes along, doesn't it?
Absolutely, you know, I mean, there were probably points, less to do with the DJing, because I was, you know, I always kind of was very focused on what I was doing DJing. I thought in a different way than a lot of people did about it. I thought quite deeply about DJing and what was going on there. So, you know, I kind of was pretty on point, I think, in what I was doing. More to do with when I kind of started making music and stuff.
Yeah.
I think there were probably times where...
What would the young Greg think of current Greg?
Oh God, I don't know. I think maybe I was a bit more rash back then, and I'd take chances. I was a chance taker, definitely full of risk and everything. Maybe less risk there. No, I think the young one would think, yeah, he's all right. I think the older one, looking back, thinks, well, he's very naive. And
you're definitely more than all right. So just a reminder, it's gregwilson.co.uk, electrofunk.co.uk.
Electrofunk Roots.
Electrofunkroots.co.uk. The book's called Discotheque
Archives.
So, Greg Wilson, it's been a pleasure chatting to you.
And
I'm sure
always
we could do this again. Thank you very much for joining me. See you again soon for another Hacienda in Conversation. Thank you. Oh, mate, we could have gone on.